He told his friends she was just a waitress. He hid her from every party, every dinner, every photo, because she didn't wear designer shoes. Until one night, she walked in wearing her real last name, and the room fell silent. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The laughter around the table echoed like clinking champagne flutes, crisp, clean, and far too perfect. Marcus adjusted his collar for the third time, trying to ignore the way sweat clung to the back of his neck. It wasn't the heat, it was the question. "So, are you still single?" Amanda asked, twirling her wine glass with a smirk that always came right before she sunk her teeth into someone. He hesitated, just for a breath, but in a room full of sharks, a breath was long enough to draw blood. "Yeah," he said, forcing a smile. "Just focusing on work right now." A round of approving nods circled the table. Of course. Of course Marcus was single. He was one of them. Tailored suits, rooftop parties, imported whiskey. A man like him wouldn't be caught dead dating someone who worked in a corner cafe and lived in a one-bedroom apartment with chipped tiles and a broken water heater. He wouldn't be caught dating someone like Harper. And yet, every night, after the driver dropped him off and the city lights faded behind his windows, that's exactly where he went. To her. To the smell of cinnamon and old books. To the sound of her humming while she stirred tea, to the safety of being seen, not for his resume but for his realness. But here, under chandelier light, and beside people with names like Prescott and Whitmore. Harper was an inconvenience, a crack in his polished image. He hated himself for thinking it, hated himself more for speaking it. "Still single," he repeated, this time with a little laugh, like he had just tossed the idea of a relationship to the wind. Across the table, Logan leaned back with his signature smugness. "Smart man. You don't want to tie yourself down before the company goes public. You'll have options." Marcus clinked his glass against Logan's. The sound was hollow. He couldn't even taste the wine anymore. All he could think about was Harper, probably waiting on their couch right now, in her oversized sweater, flipping through an old poetry book, wondering if he was telling his friends about her. He wasn't. He had lied. And somehow the truth of that felt louder than anything else in the room. The door creaked open with the faintest groan, and there she was, barefoot on the couch, legs tucked underneath her, one hand balancing a chipped mug, while the other traced invisible lines across the margin of an old yellowed book. Her eyes lifted slowly when Marcus stepped in, like she'd been reading the air more than the words. "You're late," Harper said softly, not accusing, not angry, just observant, as always. Marcus didn't answer at first. He shut the door gently behind him, the weight of the evening settling in his chest like wet concrete. She turned the page, even though her eyes hadn't moved. He could feel the tension rise, not from a fight, but from the things left unsaid, the kind that gnawed at the edges of silence. He slipped off his shoes and walked toward her, loosened his tie, then tossed it on the armrest like it didn't belong to him anymore. "Dinner ran long," he muttered. She sipped her tea. Her fingers were smudged with ink, probably from journaling again. Harper had this habit of writing down thoughts mid-sentence, mid-conversation, mid-anything. Like if she didn't catch them, they'd escape and never return. He sat beside her. She didn't lean in. She didn't move away either, just watched him, with those eyes that always saw a little too much. "They asked if I was seeing anyone," he said finally. She looked at him then, just a tilt of the head, just enough to open the wound without pressing into it. "And?" Marcus stared at the floor, searching for the right way to say the wrong thing. "I said no." The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It wasn't even loud. It was the kind that wrapped around a room and made you question every inch of yourself. Harper blinked once, twice. Then slowly closed the book and set it aside. Not dramatically, not with a slam, just with finality. "Okay," she said. That was it. No crying, no yelling. just a quiet acceptance that hurt more than anything else could have. And in that moment, Marcus realized something terrifying. She wasn't angry because she didn't expect anything different. She knew who he was. And still, she stayed, until now. The next morning, the sunlight felt different, brighter, almost cruel. It spilled across the hardwood floor like it had no regard for the heaviness that hung in the room. Marcus woke up to the sound of silence. No humming from the kitchen, no clatter of spoons, no Harper. He sat up, blinking against the light, heart already racing. Her side of the bed was untouched, the pillow still full, the blanket uncreased. She hadn't slept beside him. He didn't know when she had walked out of the room, only that she had. He found her on the balcony, curled in the corner chair with a blanket wrapped around her legs, one hand around a cup of coffee she'd made herself. That was new. He always made the coffee. It was one of the only constants they had. "I didn't want to wake you," she said without turning around. He stood there for a moment, just watching the way the wind tugged at the edge of her sweater. Something about the way she stared out over the city, like it didn't belong to her, like she had already left it, made his chest tighten. "I shouldn't have said what I said," Marcus murmured, walking toward her. She looked over, her expression unreadable. "You didn't say anything, Marcus. That's the problem." He stopped short. The truth in her words was too sharp to ignore. "I didn't lie because I was ashamed of you," he tried to explain, but she laughed. Not loudly, not mean, just tired. "No," she said, eyes narrowing, "because it sure felt like shame." He sat across from her, close enough to feel the distance. "I just didn't want them to judge you." Harper shook her head slowly, as if she pitied him. "Then you were never really with me. You were with some version of me you thought they could tolerate." That landed hard, because he knew she was right. She stood up, stepping away from him, blanket falling off her shoulders. "I don't want to be a secret, Marcus. I've done that before. It doesn't end well." And just like that, she walked inside, leaving him on the balcony with nothing but guilt, cold coffee, and the echo of everything he couldn't say. She didn't text him all day, not after she left that morning in a rush, keys jangling in her tote, her hair still damp and twisted into a bun. She didn't kiss him goodbye, didn't look back. Marcus had stood in the doorway, watching her retreat down the steps, wanting to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. They never came when they needed to. Now it was almost midnight, and the apartment was quiet again. That kind of quiet that made the walls feel closer. He paced the living room with his phone in his hand, thumb hovering over her contact, backspacing messages he didn't have the nerve to send. Everything he wrote sounded small, too late, too dishonest. Finally, the door creaked open. Harper walked in without looking at him. Her coat was damp from the light rain outside, and her eyes looked red, but he couldn't tell if it was from crying or just exhaustion. She placed her keys in the bowl, like she always did, removed her shoes, stepped out of her world and back into his. "You didn't answer any of my calls," he said, breaking the silence. She didn't respond, just walked past him into the kitchen and opened the fridge, as if hunger could distract her from everything else she was carrying. "I was worried." "You were guilty," she corrected, voice flat. "That's not the same thing." Marcus swallowed hard. He walked toward her, but she turned before he got close, resting both hands on the counter like she needed something to keep her upright. "Do you know what it felt like?" she asked. "Standing in a room with your friends, hearing them talk about your future wife like she's supposed to come from a catalog? And I'm just some background extra you're too embarrassed to introduce." "I'm not embarrassed by you," he said too quickly. "You're embarrassed by what I'm not," she snapped. "I'm not rich. I don't wear heels to brunch. I don't have a family name that echoes through skyscrapers. So instead of standing beside me, you tuck me behind closed doors and call it protection." Her voice broke on that last word. He didn't know what hurt more, what she said, or how calmly she said it. Then she looked up at him, tired and raw. "If you're so afraid of what they'll think of me, maybe you shouldn't be with me at all." And in that moment, Marcus realized the terrifying truth. She wasn't threatening to leave. She already had. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his shirt collar for the 5th time, but it didn't matter. Nothing looked right. His eyes were bloodshot from barely sleeping. His jaw felt tight, like he'd been grinding his teeth all night. And behind it all, there was a sickening churn in his stomach, the kind that made you want to rewind time even when you knew it wouldn't help. His phone buzzed on the counter. "Logan, don't forget dinner tonight, 8 p.m. Bring someone if you've got her." He stared at the screen, thumb twitching over the keyboard. He started typing, erased it, then locked the phone without replying. He couldn't bring her. Not like this. Not after last night. In the living room, Harper sat on the edge of the couch tying her shoes. She was dressed simply in jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back. There was something fragile about her today. Not weak, just distant, like she had already boarded a train in her mind and he wasn't on it. "Harper," he said, stepping into the room. She didn't look up. "I have to get to the cafe early. They need help setting up the weekend display." He nodded, even though she hadn't asked a question. "I got invited to a dinner tonight. With friends, investors, people from the firm," he added. Finally, she looked up. "And?" "I want you to come." She stared at him for a long moment, trying to decipher whether this was a genuine invitation or another performance, one she wasn't in the mood to audition for. "Why?" she asked. "Because I should have introduced you a long time ago, because I don't want to hide anymore." He meant it. At least he thought he did, but something in her eyes said it wasn't enough. She stood, grabbed her bag, and moved past him toward the door. "I'm not a prop, Marcus," she said without turning. "I'm not coming, just so you can ease your guilt." The door closed gently behind her. No slam, no drama, just finality. And Marcus stood there in silence, realizing what it meant when someone stops asking to be seen. They just leave. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menus didn't have prices, and everyone pretended to hate wealth while wearing it like a second skin. Crystal glasses clinked against marble countertops, and laughter echoed through the warm, dimly lit air like rehearsed lines from a well-funded play. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, nodding along to conversations he wasn't really in, his eyes darting to the door every few minutes. She wasn't coming. He told them she had a migraine, that she'd been planning to join, but it came on suddenly. No one questioned it. Amanda made a joke about how girls like that always get mysterious headaches before meeting the real crowd. The table laughed. He didn't. He stared down at the glass of wine he hadn't touched. Deep red, expensive, empty of meaning. Logan leaned in from across the table, loosening his tie with one hand. "So when are you going to stop hiding her?" he asked, voice low enough to cut through the noise, but loud enough to sting. Marcus didn't answer. "I've seen her, you know," Logan added, swirling the ice in his glass. "At that little cafe on Bellevue. Cute. Not your usual type, though." Marcus looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" Logan smirked. "Just that she seems sweet, simple, like someone who still thinks love can pay rent." Marcus clenched his jaw. Every part of him wanted to defend her, to stand up, to say something, anything. But he didn't. He just sat there, like a coward in cufflinks, swallowing the blood in his throat and pretending the wine helped. "She must really like you," Logan continued, lifting his glass. "Girls like that don't usually stay when they're invisible." Marcus didn't finish the dinner. Didn't stay for dessert or the next round of drinks. He left before the laughter turned into the next cruel joke. The valet handed him his keys with a nod, but he barely remembered the drive home. And when he got there, the apartment was dark. Still, her book wasn't on the couch. Her mug wasn't in the sink. She wasn't just missing for the night. She was gone. The silence was different this time. It wasn't just absence. It was erasure. Like Harper had folded herself out of the space completely, careful not to leave anything that might make it harder for her to disappear. Her jacket was gone from the hook. The record player they used on Sunday mornings was unplugged. The last record slipped neatly back into its sleeve. Even the framed photo of them on the bookshelf, taken months ago on some random walk when they'd been laughing about nothing, was missing. Marcus stood in the middle of the apartment like a man staring at a crime scene, trying to piece together when it happened. When the goodbye had started. When she had stopped waiting for him to choose her out loud. He found a note, folded in half, and left under his watch on the nightstand. It wasn't long. Harper didn't write long goodbyes, just a few lines in her quiet, curved handwriting. I needed to love someone who wasn't afraid to be seen loving me back. You weren't ready. I hope one day you are. I'll be fine. Please don't come looking. He read it twice, then again. And then he sat on the bed staring at the wall as the words echoed back at him like a voice through a tunnel. He had pushed her into the background so often he hadn't noticed when she started fading herself out. One polite excuse at a time, one skipped event, one silent dinner. Until all that was left of her in this place were the ghosts of decisions he hadn't had the courage to make. His phone buzzed. Logan again. Solid exit tonight. Told Amanda your girl dumped you. She said she saw it coming. Marcus stared at the message, disgusted. Not with Logan, with himself. With the fact that they were right. That she had left. And that deep down they all knew why. He locked his phone and tossed it onto the bed. It was too late to fix it with words. But if he still mattered at all, if anything still could be salvaged, it wouldn't be because he showed up with an apology. It would be because he finally stopped hiding. The cafe felt colder without her. It wasn't the weather. It was the way the light through the windows didn't feel soft anymore, the way the air lacked the smell of cinnamon and vanilla she always wore, no matter what shift she was working. Marcus stood outside for longer than he should have, one hand shoved in his coat pocket, the other hovering near the door, unsure whether he belonged here anymore. He pushed it open anyway. The chime overhead rang out the same way it always had, but no one looked up. The regulars were buried in their laptops, steam curled up from mugs, and Billie Holiday crooned faintly from the speakers overhead. Familiar, but wrong, because she wasn't behind the counter. A young barista glanced up, offering a rehearsed smile. "Hey there, just one?" "I'm looking for Harper," Marcus said, trying to sound casual, like his pulse wasn't screaming through his veins. The barista's smile faded slightly. "She's not here. Do you know when she'll be back?" There was a pause, a hesitation. "She doesn't work here anymore." The words hit harder than expected, like someone had closed a door he didn't know was open. "When did she leave?" The girl glanced toward the back, then leaned in slightly, voice low. 2 days ago. No notice. Said something about family, something personal. We were all kind of shocked. She just packed up and left. Didn't even take her last paycheck." Marcus felt the air shift around him, like the entire world had tilted 2 degrees to the left, and no one else noticed. "Did she say where she was going?" The girl shook her head. "She just said she needed to be somewhere she wasn't forgotten." That did it. Marcus nodded, muttered a thank you, and stepped back out onto the sidewalk. The city moved around him, oblivious. Cars passed. People laughed into phones. The world hadn't stopped. But inside him something had cracked wide open. She had left quietly, but her absence was deafening. She wasn't coming back. Not unless he did something he'd never done before, not unless he finally showed her, in front of everyone, that she was the only thing in his world worth being seen for. Marcus hadn't realized how many rooms in his life she had filled until he started walking through them alone. Everywhere he turned, Harper was there. In the folded blanket she used to curl up with on the couch, in the dent on the pillow she always fluffed twice before sleeping, in the tiny drawer in the bathroom she'd claimed without asking. Even in the kitchen, where her mug, her favorite chipped one, with the faded moon on it, still sat drying beside the sink like it didn't know she wasn't coming back. He hadn't thrown it out, couldn't. It felt like erasing a part of her that hadn't even gotten the chance to speak for itself. He stood by the window, watching the city shimmer in the distance. Somewhere out there, She was rebuilding her world without him, and he had no idea where to start looking. His phone buzzed again. "Logan, another dinner Friday. Bring someone this time. Or at least pretend you're not falling apart." He stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the message. Then he deleted it. Logan didn't matter anymore. None of them did. Marcus opened the closet and pulled out the bag Harper used when she stayed over. He had never looked inside it, never needed to, but now every part of him ached to find something, anything, she might have left behind. Tucked inside the side pocket, he found a folded receipt. It was for a bookstore uptown dated 3 weeks ago, and on the back, in her handwriting, was a scribbled note. "Maybe someday we'll go here together. There's a poetry reading on the 15th. You'd hate it, but I think I'd like sitting next to you anyway." He stared at it, chest tightening. Today was the 15th. Without thinking, without planning, he grabbed his coat and keys and headed for the door. Not because he had a plan, not because he was ready with some perfect apology, but because she had once left a door open in her heart, and now he needed to knock before it stayed shut for good. And if she was there, if fate still had a sliver of grace left to give him, he wasn't going to let her walk away again. Not without telling her, this time in front of everyone, that she was never the one who didn't belong. He was. The bookstore was barely lit, the kind of place where time slowed down and voices dropped to whispers out of respect for the printed word. A wooden sign hung above the doorway, elms and ink, weathered and humble, like it had existed longer than the city around it. Marcus hesitated outside for a second, breath visible in the cold air. His heart beat fast and uneven, not from nerves, but from fear that he was too late again. Inside, the reading had already started. A soft voice echoed through the room, not amplified by a mic, just carried by quiet. Folding chairs were scattered in rows, all filled. Candles flickered on small tables. Bookshelves towered along the walls like guardians of secrets, and in the front, standing beneath a single warm bulb, was her, Harper. She was wearing a navy dress he didn't recognize, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the page she read from. And she was smiling, but not the kind of smile she used to give him in the mornings. This one was lighter, freer, like she wasn't holding back to protect herself anymore. He didn't move, didn't sit, just stood in the back, the door barely closed behind him, caught between awe and regret. Her voice floated through the room, calm and sure. "Some people leave gently, like autumn fading into winter. Others disappear like storms with windows still rattling behind them. But the ones who stay too long, the ones who won't look at you in public but memorize you in private, those are the ghosts that linger." The audience was silent. Marcus felt every syllable like a blade drawn slow across skin. She hadn't seen him yet. But when she did, when her eyes flicked up from the page and landed on his face, something shifted. Her hands froze. Her breath caught. He didn't smile. He didn't mouth, "I'm sorry." He just looked at her like he'd forgotten how to breathe, and hoped that was enough to say what he didn't have the courage to put into words. Because she was right there, and he had never felt so far away. She didn't come over to him after the reading. Not right away. The crowd clapped softly, the kind of reverent applause reserved for libraries and church pews. A few people approached her, complimenting her piece, shaking her hand, asking if it was published. Harper nodded, gracious, collected, smiling politely, like none of it fazed her. Like she hadn't just bled a little in front of strangers while the man who broke her heart stood 20 feet away pretending to be worthy of standing there. Marcus didn't move. He just waited, hands clenched in the pockets of his coat, eyes locked on her, as if the building might collapse if he blinked. When the crowd thinned and the room began returning to its quiet, dusty stillness, Harper finally turned toward him. Her heels clicked softly across the wooden floor, each step deliberate. She stopped a few feet away, no warmth in her eyes, just calm, measured distance. "You weren't invited," she said. "I know." She crossed her arms. "Then why are you here?" He looked at her the way people look at open sky after a long winter, like something in him remembered how to hope, even if it didn't deserve to. "Because I lied," he said, voice low, "not just to my friends, to myself. I pretended I wasn't proud of you, pretended I didn't love you enough to stand next to you in the light, but I do." She held his gaze, unmoved. "And what are you expecting now?" she asked. "Applause?" "No," he said quickly. "I'm not here to win you back with words. I'm here because I should have been here from the start, in the front row, not hiding, not holding you in secret." Her expression didn't soften. "I meant what I wrote," she said. "You memorized me in private, but erased me in public. I won't live like that again." "I won't ask you to," he said. "But I will prove that I've changed, and not just when no one's watching." Silence stretched between them. "I'll walk away if you want me to," he added, "but I needed you to see that I showed up, finally." She looked at him for a long moment, unreadable, then turned without a word and walked toward the back of the bookstore, and this time he followed. The back of the bookstore was quieter, tucked behind a velvet curtain and a shelf labeled Classics. It smelled like cedar and dust, the kind of air that held memories. Harper led the way without looking back, her pace steady, not rushed, not slow, just enough to let him follow without giving him the satisfaction of thinking he belonged there. She stopped beside a table where someone had left 2 untouched cups of tea. The steam had faded, so had the warmth between them. Marcus stood across from her, unsure what to say, now that the words he rehearsed had already left his mouth. Nothing sounded right in his head. Everything sounded like too little, too late. Harper leaned against the table, arms folded. "Do you know what it's like to sit across from someone who says they love you and still feel like a stranger in their life?" His throat tightened. "Yes," he said. "Now I do." "No," she shook her head. "You don't. You don't know what it's like to look at someone with your whole heart and watch them flinch when their world brushes up against yours." He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself. He just stood there listening, finally. "I gave you my whole self," she continued, quieter now. "I let you into the parts of me that aren't polished or clever or easy to love, and all I wanted in return was to not be hidden like a secret you were ashamed of." He stepped closer. "I wasn't ashamed of you. Then why was I never good enough to exist beside you?" Her voice broke, but her spine didn't. Marcus swallowed hard. "Because I was a coward. Because I thought protecting you meant keeping you out of the room. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. From the shame of not being enough for you. Of having someone real in a world that only respects the fake." She looked down, her eyes glassy. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me," he said, "but I had to show you I'm done pretending. I'm done choosing appearances over love." Harper exhaled shakily, then looked up. "I don't want to be someone you finally fight for, Marcus," she whispered. "I want to be someone you never would have risked losing in the first place." And for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say back. He watched her walk away again. This time it wasn't stormy or dramatic, just quiet. She slipped back through the curtain and out into the bookstore like she was stepping out of a memory, and all Marcus could do was stand there in the silence she left behind. He sat down in the chair she'd just vacated, hands resting on the edge of the table, eyes unfocused. It wasn't anger in her voice. That would have been easier. It was exhaustion, the kind that only comes after giving someone every chance and watching them waste each one. He stayed until the bookstore closed, until the chairs were stacked and the lights dimmed. No one asked him to leave. Maybe they sensed he wasn't ready to return to the world just yet. Maybe they just knew heartbreak when they saw it. Back at the apartment, the space felt colder. He hadn't realized how many of her things were missing until now. The bookshelf looked bare. The bathroom drawer was empty. The air was hollow. He walked over to the couch and sank into it, clutching the worn note she'd written him months ago, back when they were still laughing, still real. She'd left it on the fridge, jokingly, after a late-night argument over takeout. "One day I hope you'll let me love you in front of people." He hadn't. And now she was gone. The next morning he woke up with the same thought echoing in his chest. This doesn't end here, not like this. If Harper was right about one thing, it was that he'd spent their entire relationship trying to fit her into a life that wasn't built to hold something real. Now it was time to do the opposite, not just show up in secret or in silence, but loud enough that the people who always expected him to play small would hear it. He picked up his phone and stared at the text thread with Logan. This time he didn't hesitate. "Dinner, Friday. I'll be there, and she's coming with me." He didn't know what Harper would say yet, but for the first time he wasn't hiding. Friday came fast, faster than he was ready for. The city moved in its usual rhythm, cars honking, phones buzzing, people brushing past each other without making eye contact. But Marcus felt like he was walking through it slower than everyone else, like he was underwater, every step heavier than the last. He checked his watch again. 7:18 p.m. She still hadn't answered. He'd sent the message the day before, simple, honest, no pressure, just, "There's a dinner tomorrow, with them. I want you there, not to prove anything, just to finally show up the way I should have from the beginning. No secrets, no edits." Read at 6:42 p.m., no reply. Now he was standing in front of the same upscale restaurant that had made him feel powerful once, back when he still believed that power came from belonging. But tonight, he didn't care about fitting in. He only cared about one thing, whether the door would open behind him and she'd walk through it. He stepped inside. The place smelled like rosemary and money. Waiters glided like shadows between tables. At the back of the room, the usual suspects had already gathered. Logan, Amanda, a few finance guys in cufflinks who talked in quarterly earnings. He saw them before they saw him. Logan waved him over. "Didn't think you'd show, man." Marcus offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Guess I needed the reminder of how much I've outgrown this room." Amanda arched a brow. "Where's the mystery girl? Or did she finally figure out you weren't serious?" Marcus looked at her, not with anger, but clarity. "She figured out I wasn't proud enough to be seen beside her. That changes tonight." Before Amanda could reply, the door opened, and everything stopped. Harper stood in the entryway, calm, composed, wearing a deep emerald dress that caught the light like silk over fire. She didn't smile, didn't hesitate. She just walked forward, slow and deliberate, every step slicing through years of silence and cowardice. She didn't come to be accepted. She came to be seen. And Marcus, for the first time, stood to meet her, not as someone trying to fit her in, but as someone finally ready to belong beside her. The room didn't know how to react. For a moment no one spoke. Not Logan, not Amanda, not the men in tailored suits with their barely touched glasses of scotch. It was as if Harper had walked in and taken the air with her, like she didn't just enter the room, but rewrote it. Marcus stepped forward before anyone could say anything, before someone made a joke disguised as curiosity, before anyone reduced her to what they thought they knew. He reached out a hand to her. She paused just for a second. Then she took it. That simple touch, fingers laced, palms warm, said more than any grand gesture ever could. It was a declaration, a line in the sand, and she knew it. He turned to the table. His voice was steady, clear. "This is Harper," he said. "She's not a secret, not a story I edit depending on who I'm talking to. She's the person I've been lucky to love, and until now, too afraid to deserve." Amanda blinked, lips parted as if trying to form a response, but Marcus didn't give her the space. He wasn't here for their comfort. Harper didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence held more weight than their conversations ever had. Logan gave a small, forced laugh. "Well, this just got interesting." Marcus looked at him, that same cool, quiet stare Harper had once used on him when he lied. "No," Marcus said. "This just got honest." They sat together at the table, side by side. No more gaps. No more pretending she didn't belong in this world just because she hadn't been born into it. And for the first time in his life, Marcus didn't care if they approved. He wasn't waiting for permission. Halfway through the meal, Harper finally leaned over and whispered, "You know this changes everything, right?" He looked at her, eyes soft. "It was supposed to." She didn't smile, but she didn't let go of his hand either. The ride home was quiet but not uncomfortable. Harper stared out the window, watching the city bleed past in streaks of gold and red. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently between them, just close enough for her to feel the warmth, but not close enough to assume anything. She hadn't said much after dinner. Not when Amanda made the comment about her dress being surprisingly elegant. Not when Logan raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Didn't peg you for the bookstore type." Not even when the waiter brought the check and passed it to Marcus, without so much as looking in her direction. She just sat there, calm and poised, like she'd trained her whole life to let condescension roll off her skin like rain off glass. But he knew better. He'd seen what silence cost her. He'd watched her smile through 1,000 dismissals and never flinch. And he hated that he'd once let her sit in rooms like that alone. At a red light, he finally spoke. "Thank you for coming." She didn't look at him. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." The light changed, but he didn't move. Cars honked behind them, but he didn't care. Not about them, not anymore. "I just needed to know," she said quietly, "if you could say it out loud. In front of them. Not just when it was convenient or private or safe." He nodded, eyes still fixed on the road ahead. "I meant every word." She turned to face him now. "And what about the words you didn't say? The ones you swallowed every time I was next to you, and you pretended I wasn't?" Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. "I wish I could take it back." "You can't," she said, not cruelly, just honest. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe some things aren't meant to be rewritten, just owned." He pulled into her street, parked quietly. The car idled, but the world held still. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," he said. "I just want the chance to keep showing up, for real, every time." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes unreadable. Then she opened the door. And this time she didn't walk away. She waited. They sat on the front steps of her apartment, side by side, knees almost touching, the city humming low in the background like a distant song neither of them knew the words to anymore. It was late, later than either of them realized. But neither moved to end the night. There was something unfinished between them, something fragile and alive, and neither wanted to be the first to crush it. Harper held a mug of tea between her hands, steam rising slowly into the cool night air. She hadn't invited him in, but she hadn't sent him home either. That meant something. At least, Marcus hoped it did. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said, voice calm but pointed. "I did," he replied. "I just should have come a long time ago." She didn't look at him, just stared out at the empty sidewalk, her thumb tracing the rim of the mug. "Do you know what it felt like?" she said after a long pause. "To see you standing with them all those nights, laughing like I didn't exist?" Marcus exhaled, the guilt heavy in his chest. "Yeah, I didn't back then. But I do now." She nodded slowly. "It wasn't just that you didn't say my name. It was that you didn't see me. Not really. Not when it counted." He wanted to reach for her hand, but he didn't. Not yet. "I thought hiding you would protect us," he said, words slow, measured. "But all it did was make you feel like a shadow in my life." "I wasn't a shadow, Marcus. I was the only real thing you had." That one landed. She finally looked at him, and for a second he saw it again, that version of her who used to look at him like he was home. He hadn't realized how much he missed that gaze until it flickered across her face and disappeared again. "I don't know what this is now," she said softly, "but I know what it can't be." He nodded. "It can't be hidden." She looked down at her mug, then back at him. "I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking you to," he said. "I'm just asking you to let me keep standing beside you, this time in the light." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't say no. Sunday came with soft light and the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Harper stood barefoot in the kitchen of her apartment, stirring honey into her tea with slow, deliberate movements. The window was cracked open. Somewhere down the block, someone was playing an old jazz record, and the air carried hints of coffee and spring rain. Marcus sat at the table watching her, not out of habit, but reverence. There was something sacred in the way she moved when she thought no one was watching. She used to hum to herself, he remembered, little melodies with no words. Now she was quiet. He didn't know if that meant she was still unsure of him, or just learning how to let him in again. She set the tea in front of him without a word, then sat across from him and took a sip of her own. Neither spoke for a while. "I canceled my trip," she said finally. Marcus blinked. "Trip?" She nodded. "My aunt's place in Vermont. I was going to leave for a few weeks, disappear, reset." He looked at her carefully. "Why didn't you go?" "I wanted to," she admitted. "But something about you standing in that restaurant, saying everything I needed to hear in front of the exact people you once used to hide me from, it made me think maybe this isn't over yet." The tea had gone cold between them, but he didn't care. "I don't want it to be over," he said. "I know," she replied. "But words aren't what win me back, Marcus. They're just where we start." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking," she continued, "about all the times I stayed silent, all the moments I let myself be reduced to background noise in your life." "I remember them too," he said, "and I wish I could go back to every one of them and put your name on my lips before anything else." Her gaze softened just slightly. She reached for her mug again, fingers brushing the edge. "If we're going to try," she said, "we try completely. No more halfway love." And just like that, the room wasn't quiet anymore. It was hopeful. And that was louder than anything. The next week felt like walking a tightrope between what they were and what they used to be. There were no labels, no promises, just a slow, careful rediscovery of everything that had once felt easy. But now every conversation had weight. Every silence meant something. Every look either opened a door or built another wall. They didn't move in together again. That wasn't part of the unspoken agreement. Instead, they carved out pieces of time. Coffee on Wednesdays, walks on Saturdays, late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight but never quite touched the edges of what still hurt. Marcus knew better than to rush her. He also knew something was shifting between them again. It happened on a Thursday evening. Harper invited him to a small gallery opening downtown, one of those quiet spaces filled with paintings that looked like emotions turned inside out. She wore a rust-colored dress, simple and elegant, and the moment he saw her across the room, he knew she wasn't just trying to impress him. She was trying to see if he still fit in the world she was building, and he was trying to prove he could. They walked through the gallery slowly, stopping in front of a piece that looked like a woman fading into smoke. Harper tilted her head and studied it for a while. "That used to be me," she said. Marcus glanced at her. "The painting?" She nodded. "I used to feel like I had to disappear to survive, to take up less space in your life, in rooms like this, with people like that." He followed her gaze to a group of sharply dressed men and women chatting by the hors d'oeuvres. "You don't have to do that anymore," he said. She looked at him carefully. "No, but I needed to know you could stand here without shrinking too." And she was right. Love wasn't about who held the most space. It was about not making the other feel small for existing. He reached for her hand. And this time she didn't hesitate. The gallery buzzed behind them, but Harper and Marcus stood in the corner like they were in a different room entirely. Her hand was still in his, but not tightly, just enough to say, "I'm here. For now." He didn't take it for granted, not after everything. They moved from piece to piece in silence for a while, until they reached a large canvas tucked near the back wall. It wasn't flashy, No bold strokes or loud colors. Just two outlines, simple figures drawn in delicate, blurred charcoal standing side by side, not touching. Between them was a space, not wide, not dramatic, but undeniable. Harper stared at it for a long time. Marcus swallowed hard. "What do you see?" She hesitated, then spoke softly. "People trying to love each other without knowing how." He looked at the piece again, his chest tightening. "Do you think that was us?" "I think that was us," she said. "And I think we're still learning." He nodded, the weight of her honesty landing with precision. He never realized how often she had to spell things out just to be heard. Now she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word she gave him was like a key, unlocking another door he hadn't dared open before. "Harper," he said, turning to face her, "there's a version of our story where I never get a second chance, and I deserve that version." She didn't argue. "But if you're giving me this, whatever this is, I need you to know I'm not treating it like a favor. I'm treating it like grace." Her expression didn't shift right away, but her eyes softened. "I've watched you show up for me," she said, "in rooms you used to hide me from, in spaces that made you uncomfortable. That means something, but I need more than moments. I need consistency." "You'll have it," he said. She looked at him, quiet for a beat. "I want to believe that." And he didn't say, then do. He didn't ask for her faith. He just held her hand a little tighter and stayed beside her in front of that painting. Two outlines, still learning, and finally starting to close the space between them. Marcus didn't see it coming, not the email, not the meeting request, not the name on the sender line, Daniel Whitmore, a senior partner at his firm and one of the most powerful voices in the room. A man who had watched Marcus climb the ladder quietly, methodically, always staying in line. A man who smiled with his mouth, but never with his eyes. "Let's catch up. Private lunch. Just you and me." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. The restaurant was quiet. Old money. The kind of place where the servers wore gloves and everyone whispered. Marcus arrived early, heart already pounding, trying to guess what this was really about. Whitmore arrived late. He always did. And when he sat down, he skipped the pleasantries. "I hear you brought your girlfriend to the investor dinner," he said, folding his napkin slowly. Marcus kept his tone even. "Yes, I did." Whitmore didn't blink. Interesting choice. Marcus didn't respond. "She's not exactly from our circle," the man continued, slicing into his steak like he was dissecting more than a meal. "I just wonder, are you sure she fits where you're headed?" Marcus stared at him. "She's not trying to fit anywhere," he said quietly, "and that's exactly why she belongs." Whitmore let out a soft chuckle, spoken like a man in love. But love and leadership don't always mix. Perception matters, Marcus. Clients notice these things. So does the board. There it was, the threat, the reminder. That even when you think you've earned your seat at the table, someone's always willing to pull the chair out from under you if you bring the wrong person to dinner. Marcus breathed in slow, then leaned forward. "Then maybe it's not the right table," he said. Whitmore's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw it, the faint twitch in his jaw. The moment he realized the kid who used to stay quiet was gone. He left the lunch early. No dessert, no handshakes, just walked out, chest tight, stomach heavier than before. Because this was the cost. Speaking her name out loud wasn't just personal anymore. It was war, and he was ready to fight it. Harper sat on the floor of her living room with papers scattered around her like fallen leaves, poems, notes, half-finished journal entries, even the bookstore receipt Marcus had once found. She'd been trying to write for hours, but the words wouldn't land. Her thoughts kept circling back to the conversation they hadn't had yet, the one she knew was coming. The knock came just after 7. She opened the door and found Marcus standing there, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense like he'd been holding something in too long and wasn't sure how to let it go. "I need to tell you something," he said. She stepped aside. He didn't move past her right away, just looked at her like he was memorizing her again, only this time with permission. "I had lunch with Whitmore." That got her attention. "And?" she asked. "He told me people are watching, that bringing you around, being with you publicly, makes them question my image." Her mouth tensed. She folded her arms. "And what did you say?" He stepped in now, voice quiet but firm. "I said I'd rather lose the job than keep pretending you're someone I should be ashamed of." The air between them thickened. "You said that?" He nodded. "And what did he say?" Marcus gave a half shrug. That I was romantic, that I didn't understand how perception works, that love and legacy don't always mix. Harper's eyes narrowed. "And do you believe him?" "No," Marcus said, "but I think he does, and I think people like him will always see love as a liability if it doesn't come in the right packaging." Harper stepped closer, her voice steady. "You realize this isn't just about us anymore, right?" "I know." "If you choose me," she said, "you might lose everything else." Marcus looked her dead in the eyes. "Then I'll build something new with you." For a long second she just stared at him, not like someone caught in a fairy tale, but like someone who'd been let down before and was still learning how to believe again. Then she said it. "Okay." Not a yes, not a promise, but it was the first word of something real. Marcus didn't sleep that night, not because he was afraid of what would happen next, but because for the first time in a long time he wasn't pretending. He lay on the couch in his apartment, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the echo of Harper's voice still circling in his head. "Okay." It wasn't a fairy tale answer. It didn't come with a kiss or a promise or the magic glow of a perfect ending. It came with risk, with reality, with conditions neither of them could name yet. But it was real, and that was more than enough. The next morning he called the firm. His voice didn't waver. He didn't ask for advice. He asked for a meeting, in person. No hiding behind emails or calendar requests. By noon he was sitting across from Whitmore again, this time in a boardroom, not a private lunch. "I'm stepping back," Marcus said, "effective immediately." The older man leaned back in his chair. "You're serious?" "I'm not walking away from the work," Marcus clarified. "I'm walking away from the game, the politics, the pressure to be someone I'm not, someone who edits his life to fit the room." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "You do realize what you're giving up?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, but I also know what I'm reclaiming." The silence between them was sharp. Not a single word spoken in that room could dull it. When he walked out of the building for the last time, the wind hit him like a reset button. He didn't feel regret, not even fear, just clarity. Later that night, Harper met him outside the bookstore where they'd first found each other again. She was wearing a long wool coat, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes searching his face. "You really did it?" she asked. He nodded. "And how do you feel?" He smiled, breath curling in the air. "Free?" She reached for his hand without hesitation. And in that simple gesture, he knew he hadn't given anything up. He'd just made room for everything that finally mattered. Harper didn't speak right away. She just looked at him, standing under the bookstore's awning, like a man who had just stepped out of the storm with nothing but the clothes on his back and the truth in his hands. She could see the change in him, not loud or dramatic, but quiet and rooted, like something had finally settled in his bones. "Are you sure you didn't just throw your life away?" she asked softly, the question not laced with judgment, but something more vulnerable. He smiled faintly. "If it was a life I had to shrink you out of, it wasn't mine to begin with." That stopped her. People passed around them, cars rolling by, feet on pavement, conversations floating through the night, but for a moment it felt like the city had dimmed its lights just for them. Harper exhaled and leaned against the cold brick wall. "You really left everything?" "I left what never really saw me." "And what now?" she asked. "You're not the guy who fits their version of success anymore." "I don't want to be," he said. "I want to build something real, something with roots, something I don't have to fake to keep." Her voice caught. "And you want to build it with me?" He stepped closer, his breath warm in the crisp air. "If you'll let me." She searched his eyes, looking for the cracks, for the performance, for the man who used to talk about a future but never made space for her in it. But all she saw was him, unarmored, unpolished, unafraid. "I don't want to be the reason you burn bridges," she whispered. "You're not," he said. "You're the reason I stopped crossing ones that led nowhere." She looked down at their hands, now interlaced without effort. "You really think we can build a life from the mess we made?" Marcus smiled, not with certainty, but with faith. "Only if we build it together." And in the quiet that followed, she didn't say yes. But she didn't let go. They didn't tell anyone at first. No announcements, no photos, no grand declarations of reconciliation. It was just little things, a shared grocery list on the fridge again, his coat hanging beside hers by the door, her coffee mug showing up in his sink, not because she stayed over, but because she'd come back for a moment, and that moment stretched into something more. They were rebuilding, but not rushing, not covering the cracks with fresh paint. They were digging into the foundation, pulling out the rot. One evening, Marcus walked into her apartment with paint on his hands and an idea in his voice. "There's a space downtown," he said, "an old garage, abandoned, but it has bones." Harper looked up from her laptop. "Bones?" "High ceilings, real light, exposed beams. It could be something." She closed the lid slowly. "You're talking about starting over." He nodded. "But not with them, not with the firm, with us. I've been writing a proposal, something real. A space for community, creative work, shared ownership, no boardrooms, no polished shoes, just heart." She watched him closely. "And where do I fit in?" Marcus stepped closer. "Where you always should have been, at the center, as a partner, in every sense." Harper leaned back, absorbing it, measuring it, not just the idea, but the man standing in front of her. "I've had people promise me the world, Marcus," she said, "and none of them ever brought a blueprint." He smiled, pulling a folded sketch from his pocket. It was rough, hand-drawn on napkin paper, smudged from the paint on his fingers. But it was real. She unfolded it slowly, tracing the lines with her thumb. "There's a reading space in the front," he said. "A cafe, too. Your name could be on the sign if you want. Doesn't have to be mine anymore." Harper didn't cry. She didn't need to, because when she stood up and walked toward him, wrapping her arms around his waist, it said everything. He wasn't trying to win her back. He was building something she could walk into without needing to leave herself at the door. The first person to find out was Amanda. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday morning, and she was walking into a brunch spot she liked to pretend was exclusive when she saw them. Harper and Marcus. Sitting outside, no sunglasses, no hiding. 2 mugs of coffee between them and Harper's laughter spilling into the air like sunlight. It wasn't loud, but it was real, the kind of laugh you couldn't fake even if you tried. Marcus didn't flinch when he saw Amanda. He didn't turn away. He didn't shift in his seat or suddenly act like he was talking to a friend. He looked straight at her, then back at Harper. Amanda approached slowly, curiosity and judgment written in the tilt of her chin. "Morning," she said, folding her arms. Harper met her with a quiet nod, offering no apology, no discomfort. She didn't need to. Amanda turned her attention to Marcus. "So, this is how it is now?" "This is how it always should have been," he replied. There was a beat of silence, awkward, heavy, but necessary. Amanda forced a small laugh. "Well, it's bold, I'll give you that." Marcus took a sip of his coffee. "It's honest." Harper didn't say a word. She just watched Amanda with that same calm she always carried, like she had nothing to prove, because she didn't. Amanda finally looked at Harper, something softer, almost hesitant in her expression. I read your piece in the Room and River, the one about love and vanishing. Harper raised an eyebrow. You did? Amanda nodded, her voice quieter now. It stayed with me. I didn't expect it to. Harper held her gaze for a moment, then offered the faintest smile. That's how love works. It lingers, even when you think you've closed the door on it. Amanda gave a small nod. Well, good luck. And then she walked away, not with a smirk, not with a sneer, just the look of someone who had just witnessed something she couldn't quite categorize. Marcus turned to Harper. You okay? She smiled, soft but steady. I think I'm finally starting to be. The grand opening wasn't grand in the traditional sense. No press, no speeches, no champagne flutes or red carpets, just string lights hung unevenly across exposed beams, mismatched chairs, and a line out the door that wrapped halfway around the block. The space smelled like coffee and old books. Music played from a second-hand speaker in the corner, and every person who walked in looked like they'd been searching for something soft in a world too hard, and had finally found it. Harper stood behind the counter, apron tied loosely around her waist, cheeks flushed from the rush of people and the heat of something finally becoming real. She handed a latte to a young woman who beamed at the art swirled in the foam, then turned to Marcus, who was fixing a wobbly table leg near the window. You good? She asked. He looked up, smudged with dust and pride. Better than good. They exchanged a look, unspoken, steady, full of everything that once broke between them and had now been carefully, painfully rebuilt. Near the back, someone was reading poetry through a microphone. No one was scrolling their phones. No one was rushing to leave. It was the kind of place that made you want to stay, to breathe slower, to remember who you were when you weren't performing. Logan showed up around 4 p.m. He didn't announce himself, just stood in the doorway for a while, taking in the scene like a man who'd walked into a different language and was trying to understand the grammar. Marcus noticed him but didn't flinch, didn't shrink. He stood, wiped his hands on a towel, and met him halfway. This is it, Marcus said. The thing I left your world to build. Logan nodded once, expression unreadable. It's different. It's mine, Marcus said. Logan looked past him at Harper, who was laughing with a customer, her eyes glowing in that way Marcus used to think he only imagined. You look happy, Logan said. I am. Logan didn't stay long, but he left with something new in his eyes. Respect. And Marcus? He walked back to Harper, took her hand in his, and didn't let go. Not this time. The night settled gently around them. The last customer had left an hour ago, and the shop had grown quiet, just the two of them now, bathed in the soft hum of string lights and the faint hiss of the espresso machine cooling down. Harper stood near the front window, her reflection layered over the dim city outside. She was barefoot, hair down, sleeves rolled, the version of her he loved most, unpolished, unfiltered, entirely herself. Marcus swept the floor slowly, more out of ritual than necessity. He didn't want the night to end, not this one, not the first night of something they built together without apology. I used to dream about this, Harper said, still staring out at the street. The shop? He asked, leaning the broom against the wall. She shook her head. No, this, being loved without needing to disappear to make room for it. He stepped beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. You were never the one who needed to disappear, he said. I just wasn't brave enough to stand still and let the world see us as we were. Harper looked at him, her gaze soft but heavy with everything they'd endured. You really would have given it all up? I did. And if none of this worked out? She asked. If this place failed, if they never respected you again, if we couldn't piece it back together, would you still have chosen me? He didn't hesitate. Every time. She studied him, not for answers, but for truth. The kind you couldn't dress in excuses or promises. The kind you could only prove by staying when the lights went out and the doors closed. She reached for his hand. intertwined her fingers with his. This time it wasn't hesitant. "Then let's never do small again," she said. "No more shrinking," he whispered. They stood there, two people, who had once almost let fear steal everything, and now, in a quiet corner of the city, with nothing but warmth around them and everything honest between them, they finally let the world see what love looks like when it's not hidden. And it didn't need to be louder than that. It just needed to be true.